call this meeting to order then. Welcome everybody to the, I don't even know what this, the Legal and Legislative Committee meeting for the Vallecitos Water District. It's 4 p.m. on November 3rd. Appreciate everybody being here. There's no public present. Is there anybody, is this a Zoom meeting? Is anybody online? Nobody's online. Public comment? So this is the first time doing this. I'm just going to go straight to item number 1, right?
Yep.
Nothing else to do?
Perfect.
Yeah, we can do that. All right, so I'll jump in if that is okay.
All right, jump in.
So we have one item on the agenda. It's to review the process for the legal services proposals. So you know that we're in an agreement with Best and Krieger, entered into it in March of 2018. It was an initial 3-year term with 2 one-year extensions possible. We are in the middle of the second and final 1-year extension. Takes them through the end of March of 2023.
This is the 1-year extension. We've already gone through the 3.
We've gone through the 3 years and the first 1 year. We're in the middle, I'll say the middle, roughly the middle of the second and last
Of the 1 year?
of the 1-year extension. So we can't, by agreement, we can't extend their services. There are some holdover provisions. If for some reason we weren't able to complete things by the end of March, their contract would stay in effect until we switched. But the intent is to get our new legal services online as of April 1st.
Yeah, and unlike our auditing firm, we can reselect BPK, so it's not like one of those things where they're done after 5 years. Like your auditing firm, you typically want to switch out every 5 years. Not necessarily the case with the legal firm. We just want to make sure that we're competing it so that the district and our customers are getting the best value.
Right.
Because it's such a large contract.
Yeah, so we do have a policy that says all professional services agreements that are over $100,000 per year should be competitively solicited at least every 5 years. So that's kind of what capped that 5-year term. So I would expect that when we select our next legal services providers, which as Director Sinella says, could be Best and Krieger if we chose that, we would also have that same 5-year cap. Whether we do it an initial 3-year term and 2 1-years, or a 2-year with 3 1-year, however we want to cobble together a maximum of 5 years. So I didn't want to talk today about how I think Best and Krieger is doing. I think that would be a later in the process. We can talk about that. If they submit a proposal and if we want to evaluate it at that point in time, you may solicit feedback from staff on how they're doing, but that's not the purpose of today's meeting. Today's more process. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So our intent is to issue what's called an RFP, request for proposals, to the, I wouldn't say, it's not a broadcast. We don't just open up to all attorneys. We create a list. We, through our experience talking with other agencies, who are they using for legal firms, some search on the internet, and we come up with a list of agencies to send it to, or list of legal firms to send it to. But it's all based on the request for proposals. So we did this back in, it was in the latter part of 2017 is when we did this before, and they joined us, Best and Krieger joined us in early 2018, but the process started in 2017. The RFP that I prepared, the draft right now, is based on what was done back in 2017. It's very similar. Obviously, dates were changed. Some names were changed. Like before it had Diane's name, now it has Anthony's name to submit to. Dates are updated. A few other bullet points were added. But by and large, it's similar RFP to what was put out the last time. So there's a lot of instructions in there. It tells them what they have to respond to, give us information on these things. It's not my intent to go over the RFP today. If the committee would like, I can forward a copy of the RFP to you. But I guess I'm just going to ask you to trust me that the RFP is prepared in accordance with industry standards, and it'll get the ball rolling.
And maybe you're going to talk about this, but how many, I'm good with the RFP that you're going to put out, but how many firms are you going to invite to propose?
Yeah, so it's probably going to be 10 to 13. Right now I have 13 on the list, but in some of my research, 3 of those 10 don't really appear to have really strong water and wastewater background. I may include them, and they may choose not to, because one of the requirements, it says you have to have, like, I think it's 7 years in water and wastewater. If they got if they were delivered a proposal or an RFP and they don't feel they meet the minimum qualifications, they won't submit. So it won't add a lot of burden to staff to review them, but it's on the order of a dozen. Okay. So it's in that. And I think when we did this the last time, it was about 8 or 9, I think, is maybe 10. But it's not hundreds, it's not even dozens.
No, yeah, it's good to kind of do have that initial narrowing down, but then, before it even comes to the board, I'm assuming there's gonna be, you're gonna
Yeah.
get down to like the final 3 or 5?
I'll
Okay.
get to that process. So the RFP itself, it does specify that their proposal, when they submit their proposal in response to the RFP, it's limited to 15 pages, and that's to make it easier for us to evaluate. The 15 pages does not include their resumes. So if they want to say, here's the cast of characters that are going to support these efforts, that's all separate. So we'll read their proposal and we'll evaluate it, and if we think we need to dip into their resumes to see if we think the people have the qualifications, then we'll do that. But it does limit the page. And James and I were joking about this earlier, but you have to put a cap, because these are attorneys. If you didn't put a cap on the number of pages, you'd be getting a book. And we just can't do that. There's a lot of, like I started to say, there's a lot of specific things we want them to respond to. Tell us about your experience in water and wastewater. Tell us about your experience with Proposition 218. So, and that's part of the evaluation process we'll go to. Two of the most important things are experience with special districts, particularly water and wastewater, and the key professionals, and most notably the general counsel. Who's going to be your general counsel? So that's a requirement in the RFP. You have to tell them who it's going to be. So just as a bit of a history lesson, last year we got to the final interviews, and there were 2 firms. In one of the firms, the whole process, we thought it was going to be one person that would be the general counsel, our Jim Gilpin. And at the last meeting, when the board interviewed him, they said, oh, and I can't do that, it'll be this person. So it kind of shifted the dynamic of what the board was thinking, so.
And that's an important part of the process.
It is.
Because the board and staff, senior staff, has to be comfortable with whoever this person is, not just from their capability standpoint, but they have to also be just a good fit.
Yep, yeah, because yes, we're hiring a firm, but we're really hiring an individual. I mean, that's the person we deal with, and yes, Nick will be here from time to time, Lutfi will come, or other attorneys, but we want to make sure that we can work with this person who's going to sit right there. So it's in the RFP, they have to indicate who that's going to be and commit to it. So let's talk about the process, and Director Sinella, this will touch on some of what you're talking about. So the first thing will be the release of the RFP, and so I'm going to talk about the process, and then I'll talk about the schedule, the time associated with that. So the first thing will be releasing the RFP. Next, the submittals will come in, and then staff will do an initial screening. So we won't involve the committee, but staff will do an initial screening, and we'll eliminate firms that don't meet the minimum qualifications, don't have the experience that's needed, maybe we're non-responsive to certain aspects of the RFP. So we'll try to whittle it down. Let's just say we send it out to 12. Staff may whittle it down to a half a dozen, and there'll be 6 firms. And at that point in time, we'll probably convene a legal and legislative affairs committee, and we'll have you get involved with the discussion of the remaining candidates. So you can ask us questions. If you wanted to, we could probably do interviews with the shortlisted firm. But what I would like to see out of the committee's involvement is to maybe shortlist it even further. So when I say further, that would be the list of candidates that would be interviewed by the entire board. So we get whatever submittals we get, staff would whittle it down, the committee would whittle it down, and then the board would interview whoever's left. And hopefully that's only 2 or 3 firms at that point in time, okay? So that would be the process. So then we would schedule the final interviews with the full board with the shortlisted firms, and the attorney that they're going to designate as their general counsel would be required to be at the interviews with the board. And then through that process, and whether it's one meeting or multiple meetings, I'll call them interviews, but they'll be meetings. The board would select a preferred legal services provider, and then they turn it over to staff to negotiate a contract. So you may say, we like firm XYZ, GM, go negotiate a contract with them. A lot of the information they submit in their proposal will outline a lot of it, like what's their fee structure, their hourly rate, do they go on a retainer basis or just hourly billings, that type of stuff. But we'll use that and we'll move forward. One of the things, yeah.
In your RFP, is it gonna outline some of those fee structures just so the firms are bidding apples to apples, or are you gonna kinda let them kinda, put their best foot forward however they want
Yeah,
to,
it's
and
the
then we have
latter.
to kind of
Yep.
figure it all out, because some of them are kind of more all-inclusive and
Yes.
versus, à la carte.
So it's the latter, so it's basically, they may have a way that they do things at their firm, and they could submit, and we may get some apples and some oranges, right? So that may be a reason why it may be more of an iterative process, where we said, hey, we like these three firms, but they're really different on the way they structured it, and we may have to go back and say, hey, can you put your fee in this structure?
I remember
so
that
we
from
can-
last time we did this, and so
Yeah.
it was a little tough to determine, kind of overall price. I think we even had to go back to the finalists and say, hey, kind of, what do you anticipate an annual
Yep.
billing being? I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I do, I really, I do remember.
Because some of them were kind of weird, you know, sort of
Yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah,
you paid for like, you know, different aspects of what their services that they could provide, but you didn't really know like, oh, well, how much of this piece of it am I gonna need? How much of that piece am I
Yeah.
gonna need? And
so, you know, when you go through these professional services type things, and that's what this is, it's not like a construction contract where they're giving you a guaranteed price for a certain amount of work. They're gonna give you their rate structure, but they're not gonna commit to a certain number of hours. They'll give you their best estimate, but if we end up fighting a lot of lawsuits, they're gonna have a lot of billable hours, so and their proposal can't anticipate what's gonna happen through the upcoming year. So we'll do a lot of hourly rate comparisons. They may also say, hey, for this level of work, we would put a senior associate or a junior associate with different billing rates. So we do those types of things, but at the end of the day, they're billing you time and materials.
There's no minimum like retention, monthly retention? That would-
Some do that, yeah. A BBK doesn't, it's just straight billable hours, there's no minimum. But if there was, they'd be over it.
Some do,
Yeah,
okay.
but they would put it low enough that they're always over it, right? We wouldn't want anything that's too high, clearly. So we would go ahead and we'd negotiate with that selected firm, and then we'd bring the negotiated contract in front of the board to approve the agreement, and then they would start presumably on April 1st, that's the target, and I'll go after the schedule next. So before I throw dates to these steps, do you guys have any questions?
I wrote some down, but I think you answered all of them. Oh, is that open to the public? Does the public know the terms of the contract that we have with,
They-
so is there other, basically, my ultimate question is there other firms that are aware, have they approached us because they know that they're on their last term? Do they know the terms of their agreement? Is that public knowledge?
It's public knowledge, yes. Once the board approves it, it's public knowledge. While we're negotiating and the RFP submittals aren't,
Right, during negotiations, no.
having said that, if somebody put in a public records request during the solicitation process and say, hey, I want to see all the proposals that were submitted, and James, you can back me up, I think we have to release the document.
That's correct. So this happens during construction contracts sometimes, while we're negotiating and we're going, not negotiating, but going through construction contract, we'll get a public records request that they want to see everybody's bids. We will always release them after we award, because then now that's a public action. But if they put a records request in, we give it to them. But staff doesn't voluntarily give it to them until that happens.
Yes. So professional courtesy in the attorney's world, they don't typically do that. We don't see them asking for what the other people proposed. And in our RFP, it says, to the extent possible, we'll keep that information private. But if a qualifying Public Records Act request comes in and it's deemed that we have to release it, you can't hold us accountable because we
Gotcha.
released that information.
But our budget information pertaining to this aspect, this legal aspect of our operation is public information, so other bidders could find out, kind of, they could look at it, what have we spent the last 3 years, 5 years, whatever it might be,
Yeah.
or at least what we've budgeted for, maybe, they could probably find out.
No,
both
they'll
budget
actually
and
know,
spend.
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Year-end report shows the actual expenses.
Yeah, it's in our budget document and updates. Every quarter, we show an update on how much BBK is spent. So,
Have we been approached by any firms? I mean,
No.
are we typically or no?
no, to ask for how your
Any
current.
firms coming to us saying, hey, we'd like to be your legal provider?
Yeah, I hear from firms from time to time, and they're aware that I don't know how industry-wide knowledge it is, but some are aware that it's ending, and they said, hey, make sure we're on the list.
Okay, so, okay.
That's all they're asking for, is to be put on the list,
Put
make
on the
sure.
list when the time comes.
Yeah, because we're not advertising in Attorneys Today magazine just generically, we have a targeted list that we're going through. Now, having said that, if somebody who wasn't on the list caught wind of it and asked to be given a proposal or an RFP, I'd probably give it to them. I'm not gonna preclude them. I just didn't wanna open it up and end up with 1,000 submittals.
Yeah,
And
Gotcha.
we scoured San Diego County, Southern Orange, and Southern Riverside. I wasn't looking for an LA firm or a San Francisco-based firm. If it was a San Francisco-based firm that had a San Diego office that had a lot of good water and wastewater experience, then they're on the list. so.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think we had that last time too. We had, I think, a firm in LA or Orange County that.
It's LA,
And,
yeah.
yeah, and part of it was gonna, I think there was our actual lawyer was gonna commute, you know, for the meetings and stuff, and it just seemed like it
Between
was
LA and San
too,
Diego?
yeah, too
Yeah.
burdensome.
Well, you know what's gonna happen, there's gonna be a lot of meetings they can't make, and they're gonna send a junior associate, and you're not gonna end up with the relationship you
Yeah.
expected, so
Right.
and that's maybe something that the committee chooses when you do so staff narrows it down and you narrow it down further. When you narrow it down further, you may wanna consider those types of things. We don't want an LA firm or a Las Vegas-based firm, we want a local San Diego-based firm.
Well, that was my question. So you said staff is gonna whittle it down. If you don't mind me asking, what part of staff? Because that's an important.
Well, probably be
We don't
James.
deal with legal much.
Yeah,
But
it'll probably be
staff
James and I.
Okay, so when you say
primarily.
staff, it's mainly you
It's,
two.
yeah, it's upper level management staff, and we may tap into the management team as a whole. Some people may have worked at other agencies that have experience working with an attorney or a firm that we may wanna hear things from, so. But it'll probably primarily be James and myself.
I mean, who typically at Vallecitos communicates with legal on a daily or regular basis?
Yeah, there's a lot.
Is there a lot?
Yeah, well, it's at least, there's probably a dozen people that reach out from time to time, probably 4 to 5 that are on a regular basis. I know Megan does all the time over in Ed Shop. I do, Rondi does, Bridget does, James does,
Yeah,
James'
so
group.
the majority is really engineering, but each one's specific. So operations, you're really just looking at contracts and insurance requirements, certificates. Engineering, it's a wider spectrum, but it's really all related to either property or contracts or construction. And then, of course, when you get into Rondi, that's human resources, you know, so the way it's structured with BBK, they have specialties in each one, and each group reaches out to that specialty.
Yeah. We try to limit staff interaction. It's not like we tell all staff members, feel free to reach out to them, because every time they
Because it's
reach out to them,
billable?
we get a bill.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and we get a very detailed summary every month, their bill comes in, and it's, every time there's a phone call, it'll say 6-minute phone call, 10th of an hour, talking to so-and-so about this, and 12 minutes talking about that. It's very detailed, but it's a lot of names. And it's like, oh, wow, Megan called a lot about that contract, and it's like, okay, but it all seems legit. Sometimes they'll reach out to staff and say, hey, did you really have a 2-hour meeting with Best and Krieger? Mike Arthur will say, yeah, we were talking about Prop 218, and we were locked in a room for 2 hours on that one, so.
All right, no, thank you.
All right, so I'll talk about the schedule. First thing on the schedule is finalizing the RFP, and the date I have associated with that is tomorrow. So I think it's in good shape, but I wanted to wait until after we had this meeting. And although you don't have the RFP in front of you, if there's anything you'd like to make sure is included in there, for example, you know, you expressed, we want to make sure we know who the general counsel is. That's already in there. But if there's other thoughts you have, let me know. I'll incorporate it in, and we'll finalize it tomorrow. So I don't need to know right now, but just that's the timeline. Next thing on the schedule is actually mailing the RFP. So it'll be finalized tomorrow, but it's gonna take us some time to prepare it and mail it out. I have that tagged as next Wednesday, November 9th. The proposals will be due back to us on December 9th. That's 30 days, gives them a month.
And it's pretty typical.
Pretty typical. That's a Friday, so it's the end of that week. So it's actually 4 weeks and 2 days. If we mail it out Wednesday and they get it that week, then they'll have 4 full weeks. The initial screening completed by staff, most likely James and I, maybe some of the management, 2 weeks, we're giving ourselves for that, so that's December 23rd. It's
And you
getting
do
close to the
that just by
holidays.
paper, you don't talk to any individual, it's just based on the return of the RFP.
Yeah, unless there's if we need a clarifying question, if like for some reason they submitted something and it wasn't legible, or we have some lack of clarity, we may reach out for clarification, but you have to be careful, because you can't give a firm an unfair advantage by giving them an opportunity to provide you supplemental information that not everybody knew.
Usually, in the RFPs that I do in my day job, if there's ever a request for information, we'll receive that request, but we'll put the same question and the answer out to everybody.
Yeah, so that's in that that 4-week process. So they have a December 9th deadline to submit it. If before leading up to December 9th, somebody says, request for information, can you clarify what you meant in the proposal or in the request for proposal, we would do exactly what you said. We'd send it out to the whole list. And we wouldn't say who submitted the question, but we would say a question was submitted, here's the answer, you all have the same information now. So nobody can be viewed, oh, you were giving him inside information, we didn't know that. So, all right, so December 23rd, the initial screening by staff, so that's at first, squeezing it down. I put in 2 potential meetings for this committee to meet to do their further consideration. And those are the week of January 9th. So that's, January 9th is a Monday, but I didn't have your dates yet, so I'm just saying the week of. And then the week of January 23rd. We may meet the week of January 9th, and you may say, hey, staff, thanks for narrowing it down to 6, and we think these 3 are worthy to go forward. Or you may say, we need some more information, can you reach out to these 6 firms that we already downlisted to give us some more information? And I included a second potential for you, for this committee to meet.
And these 2 weeks, or these 2 meetings would not be the ones where we actually, speak with the bidders, or would they be?
I would suggest no, but it could be. So that's another reason for having a second meeting.
Yeah.
You may want to say, hey, we easily narrowed it from 6 to 4, but we want to get it down to 2 for the board. So we want to interview the 4. Let's bring in the 4, and the committee will narrow it to 2. So you have some
So
flexibility
the
in the
first meeting
schedule.
will be just to kind of discuss the proposals
Yeah.
with you guys, and then try to get it down to 3 or 4.
Yeah, because sometimes it's crystal clear. You get the submittals and they separate themselves out. Some just did a knockout job, right? We may narrow it down to 3. We may say there was such a difference between the top 3 and the rest that it's not even worth. Or we may only narrow it down to 9, we don't know. So until we have that first committee meeting, we won't really know what your comfort level is, but that's why I put a second potential meeting so that we can do a little bit more work, maybe invite in some top candidates, request some more information. You may have questions of us that we may need time to research, so.
Is that, is the Wednesday of that week, of the 11th, that sounds like it's, probably the second Wednesday of the month?
Yeah, so that's not a board meeting.
So that would maybe, if that works for you. The 9th is not good for me, I know that, but,
I didn't even know that already.
well, because I fly
You
back
may be
from
sworn
Europe.
in somewhere?
Well, the 9th is a Monday,
But it is all.
yeah.
I know, that's what I'm wondering.
So you'll be jet lagged.
Yeah, I'll be jet lagged on Monday, but,
That's
but I'll-
January 9th, you said?
So the 9th is a Monday, and you're suggesting the 11th, maybe? Yeah, so if you want to pick dates today, we can.
I believe the 11th would work for me, if that's,
Director Pennick, does that,
Yeah, just like at 4 o'clock, the hour before you mean board meeting?
there's no board
there's
meeting
no
that
board
day.
meeting, but
So,
but 4 o'clock works good for me too.
yeah, so it's a non-board meeting date.
Oh,
It doesn't have to be 4 o'clock, but I know out of respect to your work schedules, it's probably best to have it later in the day or real early in the day, so.
I'm good with that.
4 o'clock is fine,
Drawing down.
let's say 4 PM. And then the next one would be the week of January 23rd, 2 weeks after that. So if you want to keep them on Wednesdays, it could be the 25th then.
That one may or may not be required.
It may not be necessary.
Yeah, that's a soft hold on that one.
Okay.
So let's see, for now, we'll say 125 at 4 PM. And then the week of January 30th, which is the following week, would be the board interviews. So we'd have to be careful. So if we had a meeting the 25th and you all narrowed it down to 3, we'd have to reach out to those 3 firms and say, hey, can you come in next week? So that could be a little tight.
Yeah, well, not only could it be tight, but it's also, it's a long day. It's some, if I remember correctly, going through 3 interviews, they're about an hour apiece.
Yep.
And so you're talking 3 hours there, plus board discussion, and it's kind of a half a day thing.
It's
we
probably
did-
3/4 of a day.
Yeah, if we did all 3 at the same time, which is probably a good idea.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest. And I think that's last time when the board interviewed, I think it was just 2 firms, wasn't it? Or was it 3?
Can't remember.
It was not more than 3.
Yeah.
And it was, I think we.
And
it
we
was a
set
better
up,
part
we
of
set up a
half day.
table down here
Yep.
where we sat down there with them. and-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I certainly would recommend that all 5 board members, whoever those 5 board members may be next year, be in attendance for that, because it's a huge decision that we're making. So that's the only place in the schedule that I have a little bit of concern, is that 1-week turnaround to shortlisting or down selecting the final ones to be interviewed and actually conducting the interviews.
So that brings up a point. If there is a change in board members, when does that change take place?
So that'll take place at the first meeting in December,
Okay.
which for us this year is going to be December 14th. We're going to cancel the first meeting in December because it's the day before the election results are certified. So it doesn't help us to figure out how to move forward. So we're going to cancel the first meeting, have a special meeting on the 14th of December where we would seat and swear in new board members, do the committee assignments, all that stuff.
On the 14th, okay.
On the 14th, yeah.
But if my seat is one of those seats, then that's a little bit different because you'll have to go through a whole different process, either an appointment process
Yep.
or a special election.
Right. So this schedule did not factor in any of the potential ramifications of the election process, so, but,
No, and you really can't. We'll
yeah,
just-
we gotta move
We'll
forward.
just have to move forward and
Yeah.
adjust it accordingly.
Yeah, and you'll notice some of these dates are before the board and some are after, so,
Okay.
with the potential board turnover. All right, so Board of Director interviews the week of January 30th. And clearly we'd have to coordinate schedules. That could be a tougher one because we're asking 5 people for more than a half a day of time. Assuming that's successful on one day, I show contract negotiations concluding on February 17th. So that gives us some time to do whatever contract negotiations. And quite frankly, I think there's enough time in there that if the board needed an extra day, or if the board meeting got delayed a week, we can still accommodate that. The contract negotiations probably aren't that extensive. They weren't with Best and Krieger. It was minimal stuff, hourly rates. A minor issue, Mike, you may remember this. Do they get paid for their travel time from the office here? Things like that, so.
Is that fine tuning the original proposal?
Yeah, we take the information in their proposal and we kind of nitpick about, okay, is this reasonable? How are we gonna, we've selected you as the firm.
Because they've already submitted a proposal, we're
Yep.
just fine tuning like you said. So-
That's all
Okay.
it is. yeah.
We did, in this particular case, if I remember correctly, we did have to kind of reaffirm with them that Gilpin was gonna be our
Yep.
legal counsel. Because
Yep.
it wasn't 100% clear, and the board was really comfortable with him and really wanted him to be the legal counsel. And so we had to, I think, kind of, from a negotiation standpoint, kind of
Yep.
emphasize that a little bit with
Yeah.
them. And it worked out, they've delivered as
And
promised.
they have. And clearly from time to time, he has vacations, he's sick, and Nick comes, but by and large, he's here almost every meeting.
Yep.
So they've been true to their word, which is good. So the contract negotiations conclude February 17th. The board approval of the negotiated contract scheduled for the first meeting in March, which is March 1. That's a day, that's a board meeting date. And then I have a fallback date for board approval if something happens, the meeting gets canceled, you need more clarity, whatever, March 15th. The second meeting in March would be the last date. And then the new legal services firm would start services April 1, because Best and Krieger is on board until March 31st of 2023. So that's it. So
What were our total legal fees roughly in a year? What are our annual legal fees?
it's running about $300 to $350 per year. There's the base stuff like Jim coming to the meetings and advising us on that, and that's kind of, that's about 100 to 150, but all the contract review and personnel matters and suing the water authority, all these things that are not related to the day-to-day operations.
So the base is
doubles
about
that.
150 and then the other is about 200?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. And is Jim general counsel for other districts? Can our general counsel be general counsel for other districts?
Yes, but they would probably recuse themselves if there was a conflict. So for
Right.
example, Jim is the legal counsel for Rancho California Water District, where Craig used to work, okay? So he's general counsel there, but we have very little involvement with Rancho California, so there's no conflict. But if, for example, Best and Krieger became for Vista Irrigation, our neighbor, where we have some projects in common, they'd have to rethink and maybe for that meeting or a couple of meetings recuse themselves from negotiations. They may have to recuse the entire firm.
You could have well, that's what I was gonna say, okay, so you could have,
Yeah.
okay,
So
that's
it's-
what I was, you could have different counsel.
So one
with
of
the
us
same
may
firm.
have to get special counsel to represent us for a particular project. And maybe both would say, hey, we'll both stay away from BBK, we'll both get special counsel for that project. Because they
Gotcha.
can't, BBK's, even though it may be a separate attorney, it's still the firm representing 2 clients with competing interests.
There's
Okay.
definitely workarounds, but that's one of the considerations that staff looks at when we're reviewing the RFP.
Of that potential.
That's what I was wondering, and if they had their board meeting same time, you know, if they
Yeah.
have Wednesday board meetings
Well, they
at
can't-
our
then they can't
Rancho
do it.
California, then
Yeah.
you're just gonna say, well, somebody's gonna have to give.
Well, one of our surrounding water districts recently got a new general counsel, and they picked not only the firm, but the person, and that firm is on my short list. So if they, now they're at VID, and if they were considered for here, then that's something we probe at in the interviews. How would you handle an issue
okay.
where we had, so we want to
Interesting.
see how they recommend handling the issue. They know the law better than we do, but they should be able to give a good on-the-spot answer to an issue like that.
Gotcha.
It's a small world. You'll find out these firms, they represent multiple districts. Most of the time, our interests are aligned. We all want to have good legislation that supports special districts, but sometimes, particularly if there's a water rights issue, it can be really combative, so. So that's all I had today. I just want to kind of get your thumbs up that you're okay with us starting the process. If you have any more information to put into the RFP, even though you don't have it in front of you, now's a good time to tell me. So tomorrow I want to finalize it. Middle of next week it goes out, and then we have about a month of waiting for proposals to roll in. And then maybe let me know how you want to be involved in that process. Maybe I could set up another meeting at about the deadline time, just to let you know how many proposals did we get, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Nope, sounds good.
I liked everything that you presented. Maybe to your last point there, maybe another committee meeting just for an update at some point if that's, if it's needed.
Okay.
Let's keep it at least as an option.
How about I suggest we do it right after the proposals are due? So we'll have an idea. So that's, they're due the December 9th. So sometime after December 9th, we'll try to schedule something and.
I mean, even if, I don't even know if it needs to be a meeting, just an update, right?
Well, it could be, it depends. I guess it really just
I
depends
mean,
on
if
the
it's, I mean, if it's
circumstances.
just to get together and say, yep, we got them all in, we're gonna look at them, good to see you, and we're out of here.
Yeah.
And I can
It'd be
certainly
like-
do just an email to both of you.
So,
and-
yeah, if there's something to discuss, let's do it, let's get together. If there's
Okay.
nothing to discuss, just an update, hey, we got
Okay.
12 of the 14 back,
Well,
that can be done.
we'll
via
start
email.
with that. I'll send you an email and I'll say if there's anything
Yeah,
unanticipated, I'll let you know. And if you say, I think we should meet to discuss that, because we didn't anticipate that happening.
that's what I read.
Okay,
Great.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Thank you, appreciate it.
yeah, you're welcome. So, I think we'll get a lot of interest. I think we're a well-respected district. We're a good enough size of a district that a lot of the bigger firms, we're not the big guy, we're not the city of San Diego or a really big district, but we're big enough to get the interest of the bigger law firms.
And overall, are we not happy with BB&K?
Yeah, I'd rather not talk about that here
Okay.
today.
Just public meeting?
That, I hope no one interprets that good or bad. It's
No, I
just,
know.
We'll talk about that at a subsequent meeting, probably when we're down selecting, right?
Okay.
The good and bad thing about being a firm like BBK, where you're submitting to get the contract again, you have history. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad, and I'll share with you our history.
I would, I'd like to know the history, yeah.
Yeah.
When is a good forum to go over that?
I'd say that first meeting, probably that meeting that we have the week of, we scheduled for January 11th.
Where we can actually discuss firms and positives, pros, cons, and
Yeah,
otherwise?
we can talk about the firms that submitted.
Is that a private meeting, or is that a?
Yeah, I got to remind myself, I don't remember what we did in terms of, because you don't want to be in a public
I
meeting
know.
talking about airing dirty laundry, because it's almost like in a performance evaluation for Best, Best, and Krieger. And there should be some protections for that, and I think there are. I'll talk to Mr. Gilpin. Jim's got some potential conflicts, right? I asked him to review the RFP. He said, I can't review the RFP because that would preclude me from submitting on the RFP. I didn't want to go out and pay an outside attorney to review it. It's a pretty straightforward document. I was hoping to get a fresh set of eyes. But I'm going to send it to James. He can take a quick look at it, and then we'll finalize it. And it's just an RFP. It's not a legally binding document, right? It just starts the process is all it does.
Yep.
Interesting. No, good.
So,
Okay, we're meeting adjourned.
anything else?
Nothing else?
All good?
all right, thank you both.
Done.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.